In this tutorial, I'm going to be sharing tons of tips and tricks on how to decoupage with the iron-on method. First up, let's talk about our mediums. And people, there are a lot of options out there. Mod Podge is always a go-to for me. I do love this stuff for fabric. And please keep in mind that these are things I have used and have worked well for me. And because I know that not everyone's budget is the same, on this channel, I pride myself in using different products with different price points to give you lots of options. For example, the name brand Glad Cling Wrap works just as good as the Great Value plastic wrap, and this is cheaper. I know, cling wrap, right? It's a weird medium, but it can be done. Now, what materials can you iron on? Well, people, there's a lot of them. First up, let's start with the fabric. Now, this has worked really well for me with all the mediums and on different surfaces, except for whenever I've tried the cling wrap. But I've had people in my comments with more experience than me tell me the reason why I struggle is because I use this iron. And most of the time for my DIY projects, this works just fine for me. But it's been recommended to use a regular iron that can get above temperatures of 400. So keep that in mind if you go to use cling wrap and fabric. One of my favorite ways to use this method is with napkins. And that's whether you're printing on them at home or find decorative ones in the store. Wrapping paper gives you tons and tons of options, and you can pick this stuff up at Dollar Tree, Walmart, pretty much anywhere, and the designs are almost unlimited. One of the most common things I think to iron on is probably paper, and I'm talking a range of paper, whether it's regular paper from books, dictionary pages, cardstock, all those things. Super easy and super inexpensive. One of my favorite places to get thick paper that has really good decorative options is Hobby Lobby. And another favorite thing of mine to use is tissue paper. For our first demonstration, that's what we're going to be using, and we're going to be ironing on this large wood bread box. It is the largest piece I have ever ironed anything to. The tissue paper we're going to be using for this project is from my own personal creative brand called TDS. It's short for the DIY struggle for anyone interested. This particular decoupage print is called Lonely Solomon. This print and over 40 other designs can be found at the DIYstruggle.com for anyone that might be interested. But please take the techniques I am about to share, the tips, the tricks, and apply it to whatever you plan on using this iron-on method with. It does not have to be a TDS piece for you to get these results. I'm personally using Mod Podge on this piece. Use whatever medium you feel works best for you. And also, it should go without saying, you want to make sure your pieces are always clean and free of debris. I would be mindful that as you're spreading out your Mod Podge, that if you're using a paintbrush or a sponge, that it is not falling apart in the Mod Podge. If it is, make sure to pick it out as you're going. And for your application of your medium, people, do not be chinchy with your medium, my friends. Put a nice, thick, juicy layer all over the sections you plan on applying your material to, and then let it dry naturally for a few hours. When it's completely dry, then it's time to bring on in your iron. And for this little tiny iron, I turn this sucker all the way up. You use whatever iron you think is best for your projects. This works fine for me. And yes, you can buy cheap and expensive iron off Amazon or Walmart. It does not have to be a Cricut name brand one. I trimmed this piece down to size with some scissors. Feel free to use whatever method of trimming down your paper to the size that you need, or your napkin, or whatever you're ironing on, with what makes sense for your project. Your water with your paintbrush, whatever. There really isn't a right or wrong way to do this. It's just what works best for you and what you're trying to cover and accomplish for the project with your iron on. When you're happy with that, grab some parchment paper. I'm currently using this, but you can absolutely use generic brands. I've used a Walmart brand before. That has worked just fine. And for anyone wondering if you can use wax paper over parchment paper, wax paper prevents sticking. Parchment paper is for heat. Keep that in mind. You can put parchment paper in the oven. Wax paper has a thin wax residue around it that should stay at room temperature. There's going to be different opinions on this, but I'm going to tell you how I prefer to do it. From one side to the next. I have actually had an issue before where I've started in the middle, or I've went all the way around, and I've had just bubbling in sections that I've skipped. And it's kind of rough doing the iron-on method, trying to go back and fix that. You'll see like a dent in the paper in certain sections. So I like to start from one side of my projects and work my way to the opposite side, smoothing with my hand as I go. When I'm like done from side to side, I then go ham with the iron, people. Like, don't let me fool you. I go all over it. I get wild at that point. Once I know it's on there, you know what I'm saying? I make sure it's on and then I go all over it. The reason why I wanted to share this particular project is because I'm asked very often if you can iron on circular things, and you absolutely can, with care. Gingerly get your paper in the spot that you want it and then press the parchment paper down. And then rotate the iron. Be mindful of everything because you're going to be holding the parchment paper, the tissue paper in its spot, and then trying to move the iron on the curve. It can be a little bit painstaking and you might need a little bit of patience. I know it's rough. You got this though. You got this. Once you're completely happy with the piece that you have ironed on, no matter what material you're using, you're going to want to sand off the excess. Or, I mean, some people use other methods. We don't really do that one around here. It doesn't work out so well for us. You do you. Don't let me tell you how to trim your excess off. You know what I'm saying? Just don't be judging mine, okay? I'm using a finger sander. I'm going straight down with the sanding off and pulling our piece apart, and then applying the same method as we continue on with our project. A tip for when you're trying to get into very tight corners is to iron up your piece as close as you can get, and then grab your heat gun and a little card, something flat that you can press in there. The heat gun is heating up that Mod Podge just like the iron does, but instead of being able to press with your iron, you're using the plastic to press it down. It takes a couple minutes, and I find that these results work really well when you're able to cut down your piece to the exact size. Sometimes you're going to have some overhang, and that's fine. You can come back in with your X-Acto knife and get anything off that didn't attach to your project. I waited till the next day and then came back in with some Mod Podge and sealed over this. Another tip, because I get asked a lot, some people have rebubbling even after the iron on. Thin layers. Really thin layers of sealer, and you can layer your sealer. Just make sure that the first layer that you're applying over your napkin or whatever it is really thin, and that will help to reduce any of wrinkling or bubbling up. Usually I have none, but in the event that that does happen, I was recently given another tip that you can take the parchment paper, press it back down over top the piece, and iron it again. For this demonstration, we're going to be taking a napkin and iron it onto a little basket that we constructed out of tumbling blocks. On our first project, we kept that completely neutral. And on this one, I decided to share how painting a piece white and then adding the decoupage over it can really help tie in something you're putting together. You don't have to just use the iron-on method to a piece that is one solid piece. We're going to do it over this that is tiny little bits. Make sure if you're using a napkin that you get any sneaky layers off the back of the napkin. There are several different ways that you can do this. One of my favorites is just to tear a corner, and it usually reveals the excess plies underneath. You'll notice here to prep the piece, I'm doing the same exact thing that I did in the first one, just applying a nice healthy layer of that Mod Podge. I let it dry, and then I took our iron with the parchment paper and went around the piece from side to side, making sure that the napkin was completely attached in all the sections before we trimmed off the excess. You truly can take this technique and apply it to so many different things, whether it's wood pieces you're building, thrifted pieces you found, Dollar Tree pieces. You can get some really stunning things created with the decoupage iron-on method. Here I've decided to put a little collage together of some of my latest little favorites that I use the technique on, just to give you some extra added inspiration. If you enjoyed this tutorial, check out this playlist where I have so many more tutorials that will help you along on your DIY journey. As always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, and until next time.